Now, the National Fund for the Disabled in Kenya has donated equipment worth 1.8 million shillings to benefit over 70 people living with disability in Busia County.
More than 8,000 people living with disabilities in West Pokot County are in dire need of help.
Kenyans have been urged to create an enabling environment where people who are living with disability can thrive.
Women living with various disabilities have decried the rising cases of violence against people with disabilities in the country.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ability Show. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another episode of the program. My name is Asige, and as always, I'm super excited to be here and bring you another topic and theme for today surrounding accessibility in the country. As you know, I work for the Open Institute, and we at the Ability program have been given this amazing opportunity to carry on this show every single Saturday on Science TV to talk about all matters accessibility. And I must say, it was so fantastic to see Al Kags guest hosting the show last week. I had so much fun seeing that and enjoying him on TV. He needs to do this more often. I feel like he's about to steal my job, but I'm happy to hand it over to him. So thank you so much, Al Kags, for doing that, and also to everyone else at the Open Institute who took part in the show, especially Murage Munene. In this week's show, we want to switch gears once again and start talking about something else that is super important, almost at the absolute heart of the issues surrounding accessibility in the country, which is policy. Policy making and policy implementation. These two very fundamental things have been the bone of contention between the government and the disabled community in the country. On the one hand, right here we have the government, who say, you know what, we have put in so much hard work in the new constitution to put together policies that are fair, equitable, and inclusive to every single person, especially people with disabilities, so that nobody is left behind in any sphere, in any sector, in any single space in the country. And they argue that, you know what, we have put these things together, we've gotten the best minds, the best consultants from all over the world to come and help us make our country more inclusive. And on this other hand, we have the disabled community who say, you know what, the policies are there. Okay, we see them. They sound great. They look great. On paper, they're fantastic. But we do not see them being implemented. We do not feel them being implemented. I mean, when you walk out into the street, the disabled community are out here complaining that there is nothing being done for them. Or if there is, it is at the absolute minimum. And the disabled community have come to a place where they're like, you know what? We're tired of asking. We're tired of requesting. This is our right. This is our home as well. We are citizens of the country, and we deserve to be treated as equally as anybody else in the country. And so here's the issue. This is where we are now. Today's episode is going to explore this particular issue of accessibility in policy making and implementation. And for today, we want to explore that particular topic with Sam Odawo. Here's Sam giving a little bit of background on policy in Kenya.
Well, on the issue of gaps between the policy and policy implementation, that's rather a common phenomenon, but a bit more conspicuous in developing countries, Kenya being one of them. And majorly it's because probably we need to have a little more of interplay between the stakeholders. The interaction between stakeholders, that is the civil society, that is DPOs, that disabled persons organizations, the government, the NGOs, all stakeholders that are involved in the quest for disability inclusion, I think need to speak more with one voice. They need to consult more, and they need to have better strategies in trying to seal the gaps, because basically that gap is very wide, and there's need for bridging to be done. That can only be done if stakeholders can read from the same script.
We've spoken generally, of course, with Sam Odawo about policy in Kenya, as you've just heard. But now we want to go in a little bit deeper and get a little bit more details about different policies in different sectors to do with disability. Of course, like I said, he is a wealth of knowledge, and although he is not the only voice that should be listened to, he is definitely one that we felt on the Ability Show that should be heard. The next question that I posed to Sam is about benefits. Already, the disabled community have so many issues. They go through so much from day to day, from discrimination, low confidence, lack of jobs, so on and so forth. So it's quite alarming to hear complaints about things like, we don't even know what benefits we are eligible for. Where do we get them? Why does it take us so much struggle to get these benefits in the first place? You have to go here, then you have to go there, you got to get a signature from this person, you have to go to this building and wait for that person to give you the... It goes on and on and on. And personally, I've experienced the same thing myself. It took me so long just to get 1 or 2 benefits, and I haven't even scratched the surface, to be quite honest. So we wanted Sam to answer these questions. What benefits should people with disability already expect to get at a bottom line, at an absolute fundamental, at an absolute basic? And after that, he told us much more on the same topic.
Unless one is registered, duly registered as a person with disability in this country, they cannot get the benefits, the services, they cannot benefit from the services offered by the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. And registration is actually done in a way by 2 institutions. First of all, the only institution mandated to decide who has a disability is the Ministry of Health. So one would want to go, first of all, go to the hospital, a public hospital close to them. There you will be assessed so that it is ascertained the kind of disability you have, whether it is visual impairment, physical impairment, hearing impairment, or developmental disability, or albinism. Then the doctor at the public hospital will fill in the assessment form. That form will be sent to the Afya House, where the Director General of Health will append their signature. Formerly, it used to be called DMS, the Director of Medical Services. So once they have appended their signature, that form will now be brought to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. Then once we receive this form, we will put you in the registry as a person with disability and issue you with a disability card, right? So the Ministry of Health, you start, of course, the process at the public hospital, gets to the Afya House in Nairobi, and then coming to the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, who then registers you officially, issuing you with a disability card and a number to it. Now, once you have this disability card, you are now eligible, if you work, for a tax exemption. If you operate a business, we write you a letter so that you're able to operate your business without having to, struggle getting a business permit. You basically do not need that permit because you have had disability, and so you've exempt from these taxes. And some other things you benefit from is that the National Council has an education assistance fund for those who are students. The council has a tools of trade benefit for those who run small businesses and basically they need tools of trade. Talking of those who maybe are tailors, or you are a cobbler, or you want to start a business, those kind of things, right? We have the tools of trade. Those who formed groups, persons with disabilities who form self-help groups, we know those are registered by the DSDO, the District Social Development Officer at the sub-county. Those groups also we have a fund at the council. We call that the Economic Empowerment Fund. So they can apply for that. That one is done as a group. Another benefit that is important is that those who run business companies, whether it is a business name or a liability limited company, then they can apply for the LPO financing. What LPO financing means is that you have received a tender, you've won a tender, awarded a tender, you need to service that. You do not have money. You come to the council, they'll give you a loan at a very, very negligible interest rate. I think it's 1%. And yes, so that you can be able to service your tender. So those are some of the benefits that having this disability card will be able to offer you. And of course, institutions for students with disabilities also benefit from the infrastructure funding, which is also a fund that is there at the council. So those are just but some of the services that a person with the card. And I think I need to mention the albinism fund, because the albinism fund has other benefits. like the cancer treatment, like the sunscreen lotion, which persons with albinism are able to get free of charge. And they also have the assessment, for cancer, if at all is there, the diagnosis, free diagnosis for cancer. Just because we know that persons with albinism get exposed to the rays of the sun, and that is quite dangerous for them. It ends up bringing certain skin complications and cancer as well. So that is something that it's a service that the council offers. And finally, there is an eye care service, because again, persons with albinism sometimes do have eye-related problems, and the council, through the Albinism Fund, will enable them to access such services free of charge. We do have the Disability Act. We also have subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals. But when it comes to implementation, there's a bit of a lapse there, because one, those who are supposed to implement the law either lack the impetus or the know-how, or sometimes they just need a bit of pushing, which needs to come from the DPOs, the Disabled Persons Organization. And you realize that the way our DPOs are, I think probably we need to better organize, we need to better strategize, and we need to better involve and also be more accountable. So when that is lacking, then it means that those who flout the law basically get away with it. You also know that in Kenya we seem to have a bit of a problem with impunity in other sectors. We know in the fight against corruption and other areas, of the Kenyan situation that we are dealing with, and therefore disability, because it's an integral part of the society, that appears to also be the case. So it's a question of stakeholders coming together and seeing that this is an urgent matter to be dealt with, because accessibility is a key issue. If we are to talk of disability mainstreaming, it cannot succeed if accessibility has not been prioritized. And the CRPD is very strong on this matter. The whole of Article 9 is on accessibility. Various targets, various areas of the Sustainable Development Goals is basically trying to improve or champion for accessibility. So that can only succeed if, one, those who flout the law are brought to book. But before that to happen as well, there's need for sensitization, so that we are all aware of what is required of us, and therefore we can go ahead and do that which we ought to. We tend to be marginalized, whether it is in the social space, the economic space, the job sector. And so we must always rise up and fight for that which rightfully belongs to us. As long as mankind inhabits this earth, perhaps it will be always important that we must fight for our rights, because it's only then that we get the space. Look at these legal instruments that we have, the CRPD, as I mentioned, the Disability Act, the Constitution. Why do we have this? It's because there has been a realization that marginalization has to be addressed, maybe starting with the law. But it does not end with the law, because the reason there is a law is because there is that need for the society to realize that we are all equal. And once you've stated in the law that we are all equal, now those who feel marginalized must now rise up and claim their space. So that is something that will have to continue, because disability inclusion is an ongoing process. But some of the positive things is that at least now we are registering persons with disabilities, we are giving them cards. Those things never used to exist. Like the tax exemption, that's a huge success that we have as a country. In the recent UN conference for state parties on the CRPD in New York, I was speaking with some people from Nigeria, and to them they saw that as a wonder, a miracle that is happening in Kenya. In Nigeria and other countries, they don't know of such services. So really in Kenya we're making progress. We have representation in Parliament and the county assemblies. Parliament here meaning the National Assembly and the Senate. We do have representation. We have very, very progressive laws, the Constitution, and now we are amending actually overhauling the Disability Act 2003. So we'll be having a totally new act in place very soon. So those are positives. Those are positives that are there. And the DPO sector is also, whereas there are challenges, but they are making some progress, because I see now they are really keeping the National Council on toes, and they are keeping the county governments on toes, and they are making certain successes, certain achievements, because then we see county governments. Recently, you saw some county governments like Uasin Gishu recording some very phenomenal successes in the sector of employment. So those are some of positives that we are seeing, and I must encourage advocacy must carry on. Persons with disabilities must continue with this good work of keeping government on toes, and we are also seeing the ripple effect in the NGO sector, because we see NGOs like HI, the Humanity and Inclusion, the Leonard Cheshire, Care International. We are seeing many organizations that are now adopting the CRPD and implementing it, the site savers, that they are really doing a good job. So what we must do is carry on with the good work that we are doing. We must also appreciate the challenges that are there and face them head on, and try to see how best we can improve the living conditions of persons with disabilities in this country.
It certainly is not a bed of roses, of course, because we're human beings and we are growing as a country and as an economy, and also we are definitely growing in disability mainstreaming. But we wanted to hear from Sam himself about what he thinks, or what he knows the government to be already doing that is very successful and that is helping us in the disabled community all across the board. Not only with the National Council for Persons with Disability or the government, but also if he knows or he has seen and heard about other institutions, whether they be NGOs, private, public sector, anyone basically, individuals, activists, everyone. What are they doing? And also, what can we as the general public do to plug into what these people are doing and what these companies are doing and the efforts that they're making into making disability more mainstream?
Disability mainstreaming is the responsibility of all in the society. Particularly, the government is in charge of implementation. They have to implement the law. And that's the reason, as the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, we are promoting disability rights and equal opportunities for all persons with disabilities. Now, the civil society, particularly the Disabled Persons Organization, must keep pushing, must put government on toes, and as well as the private sector. So that role of advocacy is mostly played by the Disabled Persons Organization, DPOs, through their various umbrella bodies, as well as even at the National Council, they do a bit of advocacy, because as a government agency in charge of disability mainstreaming and promotion of their rights, it means that they must also have a bit of advocacy to play. So basically, advocacy is a concern for all stakeholders.
In the previous episode, we of course talked about the workplace and having more inclusivity in the workplace. So of course, now that we have Sam on the show today, we had to ask him about the 5% rule in the workplace. Why isn't it being implemented all over? Who are the authorities in charge of safeguarding this 5% rule and it being implemented in every single sector and every single company? Let's hear what he had to say.
The Constitution provides for a progressive implementation of 5% for all elective and appointed bodies, appointed positions, both in public and private. Now, that is a huge provision. Unfortunately, not many people know about it. I must laud Safaricom as a company, because they've really done a lot in furthering disability employment. And I would really like to urge other government institutions as well as private institutions to understand that employing a person with disability, I say disability employment is as much a human right as it is an economic necessity. So if we can employ more persons with disabilities, we'll reduce begging, we'll reduce the dependency syndrome, will tap into these talents that are untapped, the potentials that are untapped. And yes, it would be a huge benefit to the society at large. And so it is something that many employers still do not know. And so it would be helpful if they took time to understand and learned that persons with disabilities, those who are qualified, who've gone to school and have knowledge, they have expertise, are equal employees on the same footing as those that do not have disability. So it's something that we still champion for, we still promote, and I appeal to all stakeholders to give this a priority and yes, press on until we see some significant progress on this matter.
Apart from the stakeholders and parastatals and different individuals doing what they can to mainstream disability in all spaces and all areas that they are involved in, we also had a question for Sam again about the media. What's the media's role? How creative must we be as journalists and reporters and media houses, the news, and also just general entertainment programming in helping the cause towards mainstreaming disability? Because to be honest, I feel like it's really important. Many people read the newspapers. So many millions of Kenyans will listen to the radio. So many millions of Kenyans watch TV and also go on YouTube and all other social media platforms. But are we really using it enough, especially in this topic? That's the question. In this particular topic, are we getting our heads wrapped around the magnanimity and how much we could change this game if we just did more to do with media?
The media plays a very critical role on disability mainstreaming because it highlights the evils of the society, and marginalization is one of the evils. So one thing that the media must do is get knowledge, because you cannot be a proper advocate if you are ignorant on disability issues. So they must go out of their way and get into research and understand disability issues, and also employ some of the persons with disabilities that are trained in journalism, so that they can now let people hear from the horse's mouth. The media in this country has given a lot of space to the political class. Mostly we only hear about politics. But if we also could give space for disability rights movement and let the society understand the need for disability inclusion. So I think other than getting more knowledge on disability issues, interact also with persons with disabilities. And it's a challenge to every media practitioner out there. Do you have a friend who is a person with disability purely on the basis of friendship, and not because maybe you are colleagues or you are family members or you are tied together by circumstances? You are just friends. When we start interacting with persons with disabilities, then it becomes a great thing. And then do not look at people with disabilities who succeeded as some exemplary people, some special people. I've seen a couple of times stories about love knows no bounds. Today, a person with maybe visual impairment or hearing impairment got married to quote unquote able-bodied, basically a person without disability. When we tailor our news in that manner, in a sense, we are trying to show that it is a wonder, it is unusual for persons with disabilities to marry and have families. No, it should not be the case. We should see these people as normal people, So highlight their issues as part of the society. We form part of the society. We want our stories to be presented as such. So yes, if we interact more with persons with disabilities, give them more space, cover their stories more, highlight their challenges more, that would help in furthering the agenda of disability inclusion. We are doing good as a country so far as policy making is concerned. We do have some commendable progress. And as I started off saying, there's a huge gap in implementation. So let's work hard to try and implement that which we have as policy. Because it really serves no purpose to have good policies and not implement them. So we need to bridge this gap. And to do so, we got to bring on board all stakeholders, both in the private and public sector, both government and the civil society. Let's bring them on board. Let's talk with each other. Let's reason together, and let's see some of the best practices that we can adopt moving forward in a bid to to improve the living conditions of persons with disabilities in this country.
This is my favorite part of the show, where you guys get to ask all of your questions. So let's get straight into it. Here's Ask Ability. Welcome to the part of the show where you get to ask Ability. Odhiambo wrote in and said that he's a teacher who's about to make a presentation at a school for the visually impaired in a couple of weeks' time. And he asks, what are some tips that he can use to make his presentation as good and as clear as possible to the kids that he is about to present to? Thanks, Odhiambo. Let's talk about it.
This is how we do it.
Of course, because I'm visually impaired, this is something that I can give you very, very, very many examples and tips for. But I'll just give you a couple to get you started. Number one tip would be, if you are going to present in front of a group of people who some have low vision or no vision at all, then try to make your presentation as audio friendly as possible. Don't rely too much on things like PowerPoint presentations or videos or pictures that have no audio prompts with it or no narration to help somebody who's visually impaired understand what is going on the screen. So I would say try to walk people through your presentation with your own speech rather than rely on what is behind you on the screen. For example, you just narrate, on the screen right now we are looking at a building and that building is blue and etc., etc. Describe what is on the screen so people can follow you and create that picture in their head. Another thing that I would suggest is that if somebody in the audience raises their hand to ask a question, and obviously they want to know something or the other about your presentation, then don't just point at them because they won't see, but actually call out their name. And if you don't know what their name is because it's a new crowd of students that you're presenting to, then just try and say, to my left, there's a young girl in a red t-shirt with her hand up. Please ask you your question, for example. And at least that person will then know that you're referring to them specifically, and then they can go on and ask their question. And also, if your presentation happens to introduce someone new, somebody who has come in to give an additional presentation to support yours, then make sure that you introduce every single person clearly and on time. So for example, if you've got an assistant with you, say, now I'm going to hand over the presentation to my assistant, Mary, and Mary is going to talk about XYZ. Here she is right now. Mary, here's the microphone, go ahead. So like I was saying about the pictures, you're describing everything so that the students can understand that Mary has now walked onto the stage or in front of the classroom and is now about to speak. I hope that helps you, Odhiambo, and if you need anything more, please don't hesitate to email us on ability@openinstitute.com. And remember, it's no longer about the golden rule here at Ability. We rely on the platinum rule, which is treat people the way they want to be treated and not the way you think that they should be treated. Please email us, like I always say, on our email address, ability@openinstitute.com, or find us on social media. Our handles are Open Institute. I hope I haven't completely bored you in this particular theme, but it's so important and so many people need to be more aware of what's happening in policy making to do with disability. It's such a fundamental thing, and that's where everything starts from, to do with us and to do with also society getting more privy to the issues that we go through and how to deal with them thereafter. So I hope you've enjoyed the show for today surrounding accessibility in policy. And thank you so much to you for always tuning in and finding out a little bit more about the Ability Show and supporting us in so many ways, especially on social media, as well as the emails. We get all your comments and we get all your feedback and questions, and we are really, really enjoying interacting with you. So thank you, as always. Join us next week for another episode of the Ability Show, where we will bring you one more thing to educate you about disability. See you then.